Hello, everyone. Welcome to another lovely episode of Lunch Tech and Chat. I've got Will here with me. We're going to be talking about the war that is happening in Iran at the moment. We do have some AI updates as usual. So let's crack in. How are you doing today, Will?
Yeah, good. Good. Today's is a special war episode on. I
Yeah.
mean, not that I'm happy about this, but it's a special war episode on everything that is actually happening, and we're gonna be actually talking as well in the context of how actually some of the stack that we cover here in the show is also being used in the context of military operations that are happening in the Middle East at the moment. So let's crack on.
So just before we go into war, one of the cool things that have been released lately is the new Entropic Cloud Code. So Claude Code is like a cursor AI for development. It's really neat. It works in your prompt screen, in your terminal, if you're using a Mac. You can hack it up into cursor AI as well. And I've been hearing a lot of great feedback on the code generated by it.
Yeah.
I do really believe that there's no turning back on AI code generation. It's like, it's not 100%, but it's so good right now. It's
Yeah.
like better than most developers. Are you finding the same?
Yeah, it's been generating now for quite a few months, like bugless code for me. Um, so like I think this is still kind of like the mentality of like logic and in the development of actually of code bases that is still required. So kind of like having a minimum understanding is, I think, more like a architecture and computer sciences is still required to actually to build good applications with full back end and front end. But the actual development, the actual kind of like syntax and in a pattern development and all that kind of stuff is getting so good these days.
Yeah, I saw some
So
use
yeah, really
cases.
happy about that.
I saw some use cases using Claude Code. One is someone had a massive repo. They connected Claude to the repo and asked it to document all the code in the solution. So Claude was just going through the code and then documenting in Jira via API, creating like a whole bunch of pages, like a week sort of thing about the solution. So everything documented really neat. And the other
Yeah.
one is for actual development. So you go, that's the new feature you wanted to add. You explain the feature, get the code to generate, and then it generates the code and it also creates the documentation. So you have the documentation and the generated code. It's a bit expensive though, like compared to other tools. Like I see most people have been using the $200 um, a month plan, which
Yeah.
seems to be the best one. But if you take the amount of tokens that you're using in consideration and how much you're paying, it ends up being quite cheap. Like if you do it as a pay as you go model, you would be spending a lot more money. So yeah, it's quite a neat, good solution and probably the best one out there at the moment.
Yeah. Do you know of, I guess, because you have like people developing kind of like the different solutions for, I mean, code generation and agents actually doing code generation on some of these different platforms. Have you come across any kind of like I guess agent orchestration type of framework that allows you to develop different, I guess, parallel development of like different code bases using different agents that use different sets of
Yeah,
LLM that actually are done together, and then you kind of like compare the quality, the pattern, the simplicity of the code, I guess the management of the code and all that kind of stuff. Have you come across any of those things in your
the
journeys?
biggest
Or
one, the biggest one on that for code generation is the OpenAI Codex. But you can have multiple agents doing the same thing and then sort of checking at the end what's the best result or merging multiple results into one result. But honestly, um, I don't think it's right there yet. I think it helps like for small things like bug fixes and things like that. But if you're actually writing a feature and it's something complex, it doesn't seem to work that well yet. The idea is great. Like as an agent, it checks out your code and then do all the changes, check back in, and then you just have to merge to your main branch or whatever. But I don't think the quality is there yet. I feel like the human driven, like the Claude
Architecture.
code is a little bit better at the moment. But
Yeah.
it doesn't mean that it won't get there in a few months. It just means that right now, I think we still need the human driving and operating it for good quality.
Yeah. I think maybe it's more like the juniors that actually were learning on the job by kind of like learning a lot of syntaxes and a lot of like all of that kind of like how to develop like proper patterns and all that kind of stuff. That's the part of that we doesn't seem to be needed so much anymore.
Yeah.
Because for a lot of these code generation tools are already kind of like using some of the best tested kind of, I guess, patterns to solve a particular type of like solution. And therefore it's more like I guess almost like I would say it's almost like the DevOps architect mindset that is actually required to do most of those things. Is like, okay, I need application, needed front ends to application. What's the best framework of actually that kind of like to actually develop? What is it that I'm actually developing? I need the back end of it. What is kind of like, do I do SQL, no SQL? Do I actually have like API services actually running on the side? They develop like different like microservices for all of those APIs that actually my application connects to, all that kind of stuff, which is mostly most developer teams. That kind of stuff is done by either like a lead developer or a DevOps person. It's not so much by the junior guys that is kind of like doing the code punching day in, day out, I found. Yeah.
Well, I mean, using AI, you can streamline a lot of that process. Like if you take like a good thinking model, let's say like O3 Pro or even full O4 High or something like that, that will help you to design the architecture. It's not going to be a one prompt shot. Like you're going to have a conversation and you have to understand what the results are so you can get to an actual outcome. And then you can use AI for the requirements to break down the requirements. And then as you break down into those use cases, features, whatever you want to call, you can use a tool like code generation, like Claude Code or Cursor AI to help you on the actual development. So you can be a 80% faster developer end to end, but we're not on 100% replacement yet.
Yeah, absolutely. And how does that, like, I guess we've talked about it like in previous conversations. How does that fit with the whole, MCP server development also like under Entropic? How does that kind of like all fits together?
Yeah, so MCP, for me, MCP is a standardization of XMLs. So MCP, nothing more is than someone saying, okay, the easiest way for you to connect with something else is if you use the standard. So as long as people use the standard, then you can connect everything to one place. So it's a big connector. It's like a big multi-power plug platform that everyone comes in connecting to it. So all those codes like code generation, like Claude, for example, you can connect to MCP and use it. But I think the MCP is just a standardization of API connection that AI can use. Like, I know in my mind is as simple as this. Instead of creating every single connection by yourself, understanding the XML, how you're gonna call the API, everything is standardized through the MCP. So it just simplifies the connections.
Yeah, like I was actually going through like a very interesting conversation yesterday with again a named partner, but kind of like I guess just like the context of the conversation was the following. Like so again, like I work in fintech, right? So like context is like the fintech industry, and in this business essentially had had already kind of like a relationship with the line kind of like banking kind of like custodian that is essentially like in banking speak essentially the custodian is the counterparty that actually keeps your assets, secure somewhere, right? So let imagine here your mortgage, the custodian that actually has the ownership of your the security that has your house on it. So that's essentially kind of like the custodian is the one that actually keeps that security and isolated from other assets, right? And interesting enough, kind of like talking to these guys, kind of like a neobank that I say doesn't have like the custody kind of like a license, but has all of the kind of like the technology requires to do things really fast and is using all of these, AI agents to even accelerate all of the rhythm of, loan approvals and underwriting and all that kind of stuff that it happens that is actually based on risk. And, but actually has the kind of like the custody behind it is still that kind of like bank traditional custody. And the bank traditional custody process is the thing that takes like 15 days or so. These guys are doing now things within a 24-hour period. That's how good their process is. So I'm actually kind of like, I'm wondering at what point it's kind of like in the merger of these two worlds that actually are increasing kind of like almost like conflicting with each other. You're going to have like these companies here, these neobanks or even in the health sector, etc., kind of like moving really fast because they are adopting all of this technology, implementing agents to do a whole bunch of their work to move really quickly through their pipelines. At what point it will become very, very clear that there are some gatekeepers that haven't adapted themselves. They're still doing things on an old pattern. And I was actually thinking about that use case. So like, well, in this case here, will become at some point very, very, very clear that there are some guys like moving. There was one moving still kind of like on rail world speed of like the early of the 1900s, and the other one is actually moving with a supersonic rocket, right? And at what point people are going to ask, why is your supersonic rocket doesn't deliver thing in the time that you actually do, but actually in the time of the railroad train kind of thing.
I feel
I guess
like
it's an interesting thing.
there's three types of companies. People that are ahead of the curve on AI adoption, and those people will be taking the benefit for a while and probably increasing the share market, making more money because they can save time and et cetera, compared to other company rates. There are other people that will not be ahead of the curve, but will be with the curve, and they're just going to be normalizing on the new ways of working. And there will be people that will be behind, and the people that will be behind will be so hard for them to catch up that they will have like a quick death if they don't really transform their ways of working. So yeah, I feel like what you're saying, lots of people starting to see, sort of the benefits of AI, the improvement on time and performance and etc. And they will start taking shares of the market, and that is what's going to leverage other companies to wake up and say, if we don't do anything about it, we're going to lose our clients. And I think we are getting close to that point because we are really seeing a lot of companies really speeding up their process and the delivery. And yeah, I think it's just a natural thing. It's like using robots, right? Like when people had machines, imagine people building a car handmade and someone in a factory with actual robots and machines. Like the person that was building in the factory was building a lot faster than people that was doing that handcraft, right? So
Yeah,
like
absolutely. Yeah.
if they didn't pick up, then their business will just have died. So it's just an adoption curve. Like it's natural for any technology. The only difference is this technology now is so disruptive because you can automate, but you can also automate this decision in thinking. And that's the thing that we didn't have before, which was the whole logic. Everything was just pre-configured. And now you have a thinking model adding this next layer of complexity. And yeah.
Yeah, I'm also like thinking because there's a clear, one of the clear patterns between those two sets that at least I'm observing is that some of these companies here that actually kind of like, I would say some of them actually are really kind of like in that first bucket that you're saying, kind of like the early adopters moving fast and all that kind of stuff. Some of them actually in the middle, I would say probably the company I was talking about that I had discussions kind of like in the middle because it's been kind of like it's been in the market for a while, has been developed like a successful business model, etc. But it's kind of like it's transitioning definitely faster than say the banks that they use. And then you have like things like banks, governments, other types of big corporations in that industry developing at the slowest the speed possible in the market. And I think kind of like one thing also like that distinguishes is, from my point of view, these three buckets is headcount. The higher you go to I guess the right side of it, like the lowest, the highest the higher headcount. The ones that actually are moving the fastest, there's the lowest headcount that they have. Some of them operating, I've seen as extreme as like two co-founders and a bunch of agents, but that's probably on the extreme factor. That's probably not a lot of like that. But yeah, let's say less than 100 headcount for certain. And then those in the middle, maybe, less than 1,000 headcounts, and those actually that are on the right side, definitely way more than 1,000 kind of like headcount. At what point in time also kind of like, this is a conversation that I have at home with my wife, to be honest. I've already kind of like told her I'll tell you when late is too late, so that actually because she actually definitely works on this side of the spectrum, on the right hand side of the spectrum. It's like at what time is you kind of jump ship and join the other two groups or one of the other two groups, because at that point in time, if it's too late for this like right side of the spectrum here, it might be time for you to adapt. And if everybody's rushing at the door at the end of it, the door is narrow and there are too many people actually rushing towards it. So it's like, oh, I told her already, like, it's not yet there, but we're approaching that turning point. And at that point in time, I'll say like, just listen to me. Just go and move to the last tick in there, because at that point in time it's going to be by the point in time that all of you and all of your colleagues are still kind of like sitting at that point, and everybody realizes that okay, the water is coming up, right? Everybody's going to go through the same door, and I'm kind of like I think we haven't arrived at that point yet, because of also like the immense amount of resources and assets and gatekeeping, really, that some of these companies are still hold. But I think that, yeah, some of the technologies that we talk about here in the show are accelerating that movement. And they're all kind of like coming.
I love that conversation,
together.
And we can go for hours. But I think we should talk about the war, or else we're gonna run out of time.
Sounds good.
So
sounds good. So yeah,
how you feeling about the war and now US getting involved on Iran and throwing those bombs and saying that they're not expecting, well, they are not expecting retaliation. They just think that it was just one shot. Leave me alone now. Like, what's your view on everything that is going on? I'll give my view as well, but let's start with you.
I think this is probably kind of like a lover of history. I think this is probably at the same time one of the most interesting modern wars. I mean, for sake of like and I want to say that with a big kind of like respect for everybody and caution for everybody that is being affected for it, but it's, from a spectator, if there's such a word to be used in a war. It's such an ugly word, but anyways, I'll go with it. As a spectator of it, it's at the same time one of the fastest lightning bolt kind of like wars that has happened and might have potentially come to an end, let's see, and in modern times, and as well one of the most I guess blunt wars that actually also have happening in modern days, that I don't know to what extent we can put that into the into that kind of like bucket of Cold War 2.0. Right. From the lightning fast, it's like it almost feels like what the Israeli have done, and we've commented, I think, a little bit briefly in our previous podcasts, was they were extremely, I guess, targeted in the way that they've kind of like they've hit the facilities, they hit the command, they hit most of like the key kind of military kind of resources and operations in a very, very fast way, which really makes me remind of the plans that that the French actually had designed between First and Second World War for the attack on the other side of like Germany. They had like used to call like that blitzkrieg, right, which is fast war, or lightning fast war, and they kind of like they seem to have taken that to. And that's the way that actually the Germans, by the way, actually took over France in the Second World War. There was pretty much no fight. The Germans actually used the French strategy against themselves, and actually attacked and took over France. It was pretty much the Germans actually took over France, the northern part of France in days, actually. I think potentially months, but it was very quick. And the Israeli seem to have used that type of strategy, a well-planned ahead war, to take all of those military operations. They took as much as, I think, almost like half of Iran, the western part of Iran, in essentially a matter of days. It's absurd, the operations and the amount of preparation that would require to take half of a country such as in such a fast period of time, right? With, of course, help of the Americans and intelligence and all this thing, but I think most of the work have been done by the Israelis. On the other side, there's the whole kind of like theater around war that has happened, and I don't know if you've heard, but earlier this morning, and we are recording this on Tuesday, 24th of June. Earlier this morning, essentially because the United States entered into the war directly, like by attacking some military bases of Iran that had actually deep bunkers where some of the stockpile that were being essentially used for enrichment, I think, of uranium were happening. That it was actually
nuclear facilities.
Nuclear facilities. They had actually to bomb actually those in depth. A few days ago, so the United States entered directly in war, which they had like just about a week ago, for those that remember, has said like they didn't want direct involvement in the war. They actually did attack. This morning, actually, Iran attacked like some facilities, like some military bases of the U.S. But here's the big theater actually happening around war was actually they notified the Americans before they were going to do that. So essentially, they didn't want to poke the bear. They didn't want to go and like have any U.S. personnel to be killed, so no one actually was affected. They essentially kind of say, hey, we're just going to do, because we cannot lose completely face, we're just going to do a attack. And just to say that, hey, we're protecting, according to our constitution, we're protecting our country. If we are attacked, we attack back. But they didn't want actually to poke the bear as far as say, like, we're going to attack and kill actually your personnel. So actually, they notify the Americans, say like, "Hey, you guys take." So that's the kind of like the other part of the war. It's kind of like the theater of it is like not. It was an act of like, oh, just to show that we have strength, but we don't want to attack the biggest military power in the world directly, and then having them kind of go with the same might and strength as the Israeli came on them. Because if you have the Israelis and the Americans going in your country, essentially, what that would have triggered is, I guess, we've been calling it regime change, right? You remove all of the Ayatollah and all of the Islamic Republic kind of like people from it, and then essentially you put
Do you
U.S.
think that
military
do you think the
in charge.
do you think the real objective was to get rid of the nuclear facilities and they really believe that they were building nuclear bombs? Or do you think that it's more a narrative that has been going for years because they have been
Yeah,
talking like since, I don't know, 10 years ago, more than that, about the Israeli being building like nuclear bombs? Do you think that the narrative now is around getting the existing government down, or do you think it's really worried about nuclear power? Like, what's in your mind right now?
I think, to be honest, like the thing is, I think is still like the nuclear power because Iran. I think reports have been showing that Iran has been there was the atomic energy kind of like International Atomic Energy Association, right? That was the one that they actually initially triggered the whole movement, right? It was literally within hours since a report from the Atomic Energy actually Association actually came forward saying the level of enrichment and the speed and the velocity of enrichment of uranium is increasing in Iran to levels that are very close to being able to essentially produce nuclear nuclear weapons. That there was actually within hours that actually that report came out that actually the first actually Israeli attack. So essentially they kind of like it was the trigger. Israeli kind of like essentially kind of like running. Literally have kind of, and I've read that somewhere in the Islamic constitution or Islamic goals, like of the Islamic Republic of Iran, not the people of Iran. Again, I think it's important to make that distinction.
Yeah, the people is one thing, the government and they
People,
believe are different things. Yeah.
is the Ayatollah and the regime of that came after the Shah that is actually kind of like the one that is actually doing this thing, is is kind of like going and has its goals is stated as one of its goals is actually to obliterate the state of Israel. So it's pretty if that's one of your reasons of existence, right? As a state, you can imagine that the other side will do everything in its power to prevent you from getting anything that is a weapon of mass destruction, right? So that's the case. So like the moment that the report came out by the Atomic Energy, International Atomic Energy Association, I think it's called, that they were enriching at a faster and faster rhythm, getting close to that level of enrichment that is necessary for an atomic weapon. The Israelis kind of like essentially reacted very quickly, very quickly to that news by actually attacking the first actually identified nuclear facilities, but they've been preparing this for years. They had infiltrated many, they had infiltrated already many echelons of the military within Iran, like the Mossad, which is the essentially the equivalent of the CIA within the US, the Mossad, which actually is the Israeli intelligence, had already infiltrated many of the echelons and had actually gained already kind of trust from many of them. So they actually knew a lot of information through intelligence before actually doing the attack. And when they went for it, they just kind of like they just went through. First, they knew a couple of things: where the military operations that were reaching uranium were based, and what in the chain of command were the people because that required also like information flow in terms of who would attack who, required a chain of command. They also went behind all of the people that would disrupt the chain of command and information flow for a military operation of Iran against actually Israel. So they actually attacked both of them on kind of like simultaneously, killing the key people and actually killing, kind of like destroying some of the facilities. So it was actually a really, really well prepared operation.
Yeah, I know. Sometimes I just have in mind like I do think that there is a narrative around trying to change the government because the government that they have at the moment destabilize sort of the peace in the region because as you know, they are an aggressive institution that is in power right now. I mean, the word terrorist is hard to use because terrorists by who, right? Like people see terrorists as different things, but let's say the institution that is currently on power, they have different views of the world than most countries would. Um, I think the problem on that is when you start a war like, well, it is a war going on in the Middle East right now, Israel and Iran, and exchanging bombs and people die in both countries. And it's like I saw this story of this girl from Ukraine. She moved from the Ukraine because of the war, and she was being treated for cancer. She's like, I don't know, 14 years old or something like that. So she went with her family and was treated in Iran for a brain cancer. And then she got bombed and the whole family just died. Like stories like that, like I always keep thinking like with the power of Israel in the US, couldn't they have tried a bit more of a public negotiation before the actual attack? Like, I don't know. I'm
Yeah, I
a
think
bit
yeah,
conflicted. I'm a bit
yeah,
conflicted if that was the right move because a lot of innocent people end up dying.
100%.
And yeah, is that the right way of solving a problem? Like,
I
I would
think,
say yes if it's your last resort, but were they in the actual last resort or they just wanted to show power?
yeah, I think the key problem here is like, I mean, since the end of the Shah regime and the beginning of the Islamic Republic kind of like came to power, like in the end of the 70s, which was again related to some other conflicts in that region. That region never stops, right? Is that you have like a big distinction between nation and in the regime, right? So Iran has been for, I guess, many decades, especially like the populations. It's probably one of the most well-educated, most progressive actually populations probably in the whole region. And you see that like a lot of Iranian families that you see coming overseas, coming to to Western countries to get not only educated, and a lot of them are still highly educated, high, willing to contribute to society, and some of the smartest brains are still kind of like even in Silicon Valley, and both on the west and the eastern coast of the United States actually have a lot of like Iranian people background, actually highly educated people, and very kind of like westernized, probably one of the most westernized actually countries in the whole kind of like Middle East. But the regime is very different to it. The regime has very different goals and has been, I guess, suppresses kind of like all of that liberty that underneath actually the population. So I mean, I don't know. Over the last week again, and this is probably one of the first times that I've heard that so clearly be spoken about the whole kind of like idea of regime change. I guess we are used actually to talk about like regime change, which is the regime change essentially is what we're talking about. Like it's taking over like the power from existing leaders of a country and actually imposing kind of like a Western based kind of like originally kind of like military regime and then moving towards like some imposed democracy. Um, this is something that happened many times over the 20th century in Latin America, Sandinistas and different regimes, right? But it was always done by CIA in kind of covert operations, right? It was never something actually openly spoken about on Twitter channels. So I find the modern way of doing war, where you kind of like talking about regime change so openly, like we're talking about right now, it's very different as well from anything that I personally have kind of like, seen and studied over the last, 100 years or so. We're almost like tweeting and having discourses going over on X, Twitter about should we do regime change? Is there more than any, is there more than just kind of like, erasing military facilities here and going all the way to changing the regime in Iran? I don't know. At the moment, we seem to have like given a bit of a pause as of this morning, but whether that's where we stay, I'm not sure yet. So. Yeah. Yeah, sounds good. Yeah, we can cover as well a little bit more like the, I guess the back end of like the military operations and how is that affecting, the technology, the AI technology involved behind the whole conflict, and what's that driving internally. I think especially within the Israel tech startup community. Yeah, but we can cover that in the next time that we meet up for this. Yep. Yeah, please. Yeah, please kind of like comment anything around if there is anything kind of like incorrect, or I guess AI technology in the future of warfare, like into warfare. Yeah, if you guys actually kind of like have your thoughts about it, we definitely kind of like can cover this in the next episode of the show. Cheers, guys.